Babcock's hair looked great yesterday at his presser in Columbus. What else was great? What else wasn't great? That's today on Locked On Blue Jackets.
You're Locked On Blue Jackets, your daily podcast on the Columbus Blue Jackets. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Blue Jackets, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I'm your host, Hayden Houshorn. With me, back from his vacation, is my co-host, Jay Foster. We're here to talk about the good, the bad, and the ugly of your favorite team and ours, the Columbus Blue Jackets. Before we get started, I want to thank you guys for making this your first listen every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and the SiriusXM app. Mike Babcock was introduced as the Blue Jackets head coach yesterday. I really enjoyed the press conference at the beginning, and I can kind of explain why I fell out of love with Babcock a little bit at the end. But Jay, your thoughts when you saw hockey's Grim Reaper in Columbus yesterday?
I mean, I think it's pretty well known by now that you were the more enthusiastic half of the podcast about Mike Babcock. I liked that presser a lot. I thought he said and did a lot of the right things. There's a couple of things specifically I want to point to. Our friends over at CBJ Development Speaking did a really great thread on what Mike Babcock said in his presser, what Yarmulke Klein and John Davidson said as well. But I wanted to point out specifically that Mike Babcock has kind of spent the last 3 years coaching in college. And he seems to understand that it's like coaching in the NHL is different now than it was, 10 years ago. And he talked a lot about, that he maybe didn't understand a lot of what he did wrong necessarily. When he, was fired, and let's be clear, he was fired because the team was struggling, not because of any of the, the abuse allegations, things like that. That being said, he talked a lot about how he understands now that sometimes you come away from a conversation thinking one thing and the other person thinks another thing. And so that was really kind of reassuring to hear. He talked a lot about how important it is to acknowledge things like mental health of both players and, other coaches, things like that. So, I want to kind of temper this by saying that 2 years ago when they hired Brad Larson, he also did and said a lot of the right things in his opening press conference. So this is not necessarily how things are going to be, but he said a lot of things and addressed a lot of the points that were things that I had questions about. And so I feel fine about the hiring. It's still not my first choice, but I feel better after the press conference.
That's great. That's honestly great. I had a feeling that once he was up here in Columbus and got a chance to talk from his point of view, kind of what happened in Toronto and what he had been doing the last 3 years, I felt like Blue Jackets fans would definitely be like, okay, this starts to make sense. Like he's not as far out of touch as maybe I was led to believe, which he talked about that plenty of times. He did say, working with young kids is different than it was working with kids 10 years ago. Like it's just the landscape's changed. He couldn't tell you exactly what has changed, but he just knows that it's changed. And I feel like that's honestly fair. I think it's really hard to describe the kind of the world that we live in today to somebody if George Washington came out of a, time portal and was like, what's up? It'd be like, I got a lot of things to tell you about, man. It's getting, it's a little crazy.
Yeah,
but
Mike Babcock and George Washington, notably very similar people, so that makes sense.
Yes, they have similar hair. I mean,
Exactly.
I know Washington's hair was fully wig, and Mike Babcock's hair is pretty real, at least.
I mean, do you know that that's not a wig? Do you know that Mike Babcock doesn't have a wig? Like maybe we should.
I cannot honestly confirm. But I was just going to say the part that I really liked at the beginning was just Jarmo's explanation why he chose Mike Babcock. I think he shared a story about how he was out scouting some guy in Michigan, and Babcock drove like all the way out to go like look at the player with him or something. He still told some personal story about how, Mike Babcock, he goes the extra mile when it comes to coaching, and he's really, really passionate about coaching, which I feel like is huge. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure every NHL candidate or NHL head coach candidate is passionate about coaching in some way or another, but you just know those guys that have that extra drive when it comes to coaching, whether it's the competitor in them, whether it's the way that they care about the game of hockey. I feel like it's a little bit of both with Babcock. But again, I've only been a Babcock observer. I've never had him as my coach on my team. So I'm really, really interested to see kind of what comes out of that, whether it's more he's just so passionate about coaching, or whether it's he's passionate about the game, passionate about developing young people. I would feel like it's not developing young people just because of, his history. But again, maybe his passion for developing young people got in the way and he overstepped some boundaries. I don't know. It's like, it's really, really a lot with Babcock. But
and I think as well, the fact that he's spent the last 3 years working at, I believe it was the University of Vermont, first of all, and then he spent the last season at the University of Saskatchewan, working with, the oldest players that he's going to be working with are like 24 max. And so I think probably that gave him some things to look at. And I also want to just kind of say that, like, I feel like there's been a lot of rightly deserved negativity about this hire, and I'm still not 100% convinced. But as I said when they first announced, when it was announced that this was going to be the plan, about a month ago, I think they just had to wait for his contract to run out. I said that, and I came on the show and I said I would love to be proven wrong about Babcock. And that still stands. I would love for him to be a completely different person. I think it's going to be really interesting to see how development camp goes. I'm sure he will be getting his hands dirty basically immediately. Development camp is happening. I think it starts officially tomorrow is when they'll get the kids on the ice. So that'll be really interesting to see. And I'm not going to cast judgment one way or the other, I don't think, until we see how he does coaching a game, how he does with the young players as well, because this is a very young team, to the point where my other half and I actually looked at the roster yesterday and realized that there's only one player on the roster that's older than I am, which did make me feel a million years old. So it's a very young roster.
Welcome to being a sports fan, Jay. It's just part of it, you just
yeah.
kind of
we're old
sucks
now. That's just how it is,
right?
But I think it's to anyone else that kind of feels like I did and is, trepidatious, to use a $10 word if I can, see what the results are on the ice. But at the minute, he's saying all of the right things, and that does reassure me a little bit.
Yes, we'll have more thoughts on Babcock in just a second. Oh, first I want to tell you guys about FanDuel. Take your first swing at betting Major League Baseball on FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. That's right. Just $20 and you'll land $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everywhere from the money line to over-unders to who you think is going to hit the first home run. All on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get to that $200 bonus. That's FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, the official partner of Major League Baseball. I love FanDuel. That same deal, that $200 deal, is exactly what I used at the beginning of this year. So hopefully you guys can get a little lucky with that like I did. All right. I mentioned at the beginning of the show that I kind of fell out of love with Babcock. And I honestly don't think it was Babcock's fault why I fell out of love with him, quote unquote. I just feel like every offseason we've done something like this where we've introduced a new big player or new big, personality into the team. and they have this press conference, and they're like, yeah, all these things are going in the right direction, and they're like promising a bright future and promising that the team's going to be competitive. Like Brad Larson did at his press conference, Johnny Hockey did at his press conference, now Babcock's doing it at his press conference. And I'm like, as a fan, I just keep getting fed the same thing over and over again. Granted, it's a cheeseburger with lots of layers and it's delicious, but like at the same time, like I don't want to just be another fan drinking the Kool-Aid now. I want to actually see it happen. Like, okay, we got Fantilli, we got the two defensemen, we got Babcock. I want to see it kind of all pieced together. You kind of mentioned there that you're starting to feel a little more confident, but where is your confidence on this team making a playoff run this year, Jay? I feel like I'm confident that they can make a playoff run, but I'm not confident to say that they will. But with all that they've added now, with drafting Fantilli, the two defensemen, and now getting to hear Mike Babcock talk to the CBJ media, are you there yet on this team pursuing a Lord Stanley?
I don't know is the short answer. This team, as it is constructed, should be pushing for a playoff spot. You look at the Metropolitan Division, I think the Blue Jackets got better. I think it's going to be really interesting. I think New Jersey will probably have a little bit of a drop-off. I think Pittsburgh's going to have a little bit of a drop-off. The Rangers and the Islanders will probably also have drop-offs. I don't think any of those teams are going to be as good as they were this season. Philadelphia is kind of a wild card. Carolina, I expect to be about as good. And whatever the last team is, Washington, I expect to probably also be about as good as they were. So, like, the Metro is wide open right now. If the Blue Jackets can stay healthy, which for me is the most important thing right now, like the team as constructed, I feel fine about the team as constructed. I would like to go out and get another center, as long as we don't have to, break the bank for it. The Blue Jackets don't have a ton of cap space. They have $4.7 million in cap space. If you assume that Jack Roslovic is probably going to be going the other way, that gives them almost $9 million in cap space to go out and get a center. But again, it would have to be the right one. As of right now, this team should push for the playoffs. Are they a Stanley Cup contender? I don't think so. I think in 2 years' time, when, Adam Fantilli is coming into his own, he's 18 years old. That's the other thing. And we're going to talk about Adam Fantilli in a minute. Temper your expectations, people.
Yeah.
He's not Jesus. He's not going to come into.
Can we confirm that? No, I'm just kidding.
He's not going to come into this league and score, 50 goals in his rookie season. He's just not. So, I know that we're kind of, and I've been guilty of the same thing of acting like he's the savior of Columbus hockey, in the same way that I could think a lot of people did with Johnny Gaudreau last season. Give him a couple of years to develop. Give Kent Johnson a couple of years to keep growing. Kirill Marchenko, like, in a couple of years, this team could be a Stanley Cup contender. As of right now, my baseline for this team is wildcard spot. My max my ceiling for the expectations for this team is win a round. But honestly, I think making the playoffs is progress. And that's kind of where I'm at right now is, hey, finish top 16 in the league. And then we'll grow from there. I don't want to be having the same conversation next season of why is Columbus a lottery team again? And, what do they have to do to make the playoffs? So, but I think part of that is more than a few new faces on this team. So chemistry is going to be a big thing. But for me, health is going to be the most important, I think, is if, not losing Zach Werenski 13 games in, I think was really the beginning of the end for this team. And then, the liner injuries kept coming. They lost Jake Bean. They lost Nick Blankenberg. They lost Adam Boak. Like, the defense was just brutal. So if the defense can stay healthy and, the addition of Provorov and Severson, both, knock on wood, very durable defensemen that can log a lot of minutes, play a lot of games.
Yeah, they've both played 80 games last year. So, like, that's exactly what the Jackets need, someone that's going to play.
If everything goes right, then the Blue Jackets getting to the second round of the playoffs feels very achievable. If everything goes wrong, then I don't even want to think about it. But This team feels like a playoff team. Is the short answer to your question that you asked a very long time ago.
I was going to say, print the T-shirts. First round victory is not the goal. I know every Jackets fan loves those. You said something there that kind of sparked something else from the press conference that stuck out to me. You mentioning the injuries. Yarmo at one point, or no, was it JD? It might have been JD at one point. Was like, the team's very healthy right now. Our guys are getting stronger too. Our young guys they're on a workout plan to become men by the time the October hits. I'm just sitting here like, yeah, that's great that they're healthy now. We're always healthy in the off season because we're not playing. Like as soon as they step on the ice, they're just brittle. They just break like crazy. So, and I don't know. I don't know if having a new coach will fix that. I think it probably will. I just feel like under Brad Larson, maybe it was the comfortability of the team sucked and that Brad Larson was a player's coach that they felt like they could just go and be like, hey, I'm not feeling it tonight. I'm out. And it was like, okay, that's cool. You're out. Granted, I don't want a player to ever go into a coach's room and be like, I don't feel good. And Mike Babcock's like, well, you have to play. I don't want that either. But I just want this like maybe more of a fear, I guess. I don't know.
Part of it's not necessarily accountability, but
yeah, there you go.
If the team is in a good place and the vibe, the team passes the vibe check, I believe is what the kids are saying these days. Then you want to play, and I think you are more likely to be like, well, I don't feel great, but I can play. In the same way that, like, if you love your job, then if you don't feel great, then you'll probably push through. If you hate your job and you wake up and you're like, oh, my head kind of hurts and I've got a sore throat and I don't want to be at work anyway, then you're way more likely to just call in sick. Not that I think that's what's happened. I know we had a lot of problems with injuries and illnesses last year, but if the team is winning, I feel like the players are way more likely to just kind of push through niggles and like not feeling it. So, like, again, if you're missing the playoffs and there's no the team wasn't competitive last season. So I understand if you're like, well, my missing a game is not going to be the be all and end all. If it's not, well, if I miss this one game, then we might miss the playoffs. They were out of the playoffs by Thanksgiving.
They were out of the by game 3. Like starting out like 0-3, however they did. I was like, geez, this is gonna be terrible. Everyone's just on the ice looking at number 13, waiting for him to do something. And he's doing stuff, but he can't do it all. That's what it felt like the first 3 games of last year were like everybody, even his own teammates were like, is that actually Johnny Hockey in a Blue Jackets uniform? And then we got a little bit used to him. And at that point, it was over. The team was completely lost. I did love that Babcock, put an emphasis on the first thing he needs to do is get all 5 guys on the ice to play together. Mm-hmm. Felt like the Blue Jackets had no structure the last 2 years. And
well, that kind of came out in the wash after Brad Larson was fired. We saw a lot of stories of Erica Branson coming out, and if Erica Branson is speaking out against a coach, I feel like it's a big deal of him being like, right. Yeah, well, we were getting on the ice, and we didn't know what the drills were for practice, And
yeah, that's not
didn't
good.
Practice power play because for whatever reason, So I think structure is good, accountability is good. Like I say, I'm waiting to see what training camp is like. And I don't know, maybe we'll be able to get Hayden down to training camp and he can do some kind of eye on the sky, boots on the ground kind of thing. I
do like doing that stuff.
Seeing what it's like,
Yeah.
I'm a little bit far away, but Hayden's right down the block. So maybe I think it'll be really interesting to see what Babcock is doing and what the team is doing when the cameras aren't there,
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, we're going to move on and talk about our guy, Adam Fantilli. We all know that you guys want to talk about him anyway, and we'll hit that in just a sec. First things first, I want to thank the Everydayer. We love you guys. You guys are the truest fans. The Everydayers who have been through this, watching the Blue Jackets go in and out of having a crappy team, and now you got all these stars. It's really, really great. It's really, really exciting. Glad you guys can go through it with us, and we wouldn't be able to do this without you, the everyday listener. So a quick shout out to those guys, and we know the Locked On Podcast Network appreciates you. All right, Adam Fantilli signed his entry-level contract. It was a 3-year deal, making $950K. Pretty good for an 18-year-old, making $950K. We also know that $950K can get you a lot further in Ohio than it can in California due to the state income tax. So to everybody that's like, man, he was this close away from living in paradise. Okay, California is a very nice place to live, but, there are perks to living in Ohio. But he signed his entry-level contract. He was at the Crew game last night. He is just being Mr. Blue Jacket right now, and I like it. I love it. He took number 11. You and I are both huge Maddie Calvert fans.
We're number 11, yeah. It's got a good history here.
It does. Even, Stenland was a guy that had a lot of favor in my eyes just because he wore the number 11. He was a big dude that I really wanted to work out for the CBJ. He didn't. But anyway, you saw he signed the entry-level contract, Jay. You saw he chose number 11. What are your vibes with Fantilli right now? Because mine are through the roof. I'm loving this guy so far.
I keep and obviously I was on vacation last week. Hayden did a great job holding the fort down, being super, super excited about Adam Fantilli, and also all of our other draft picks. I'm still ready to run through a wall for this guy. I'm so excited to see him in October. I wasn't sure he wasn't going to go back to Michigan. I know that there was a lot of conversation about how he probably could. But, you look at his freshman year, he led everyone in the NCAA in scoring. He had, I think, 65 points in 30 games. Bonkers. Won the Hobie Baker as a freshman. In theory, has nothing else to prove in college. He goes back to college and what? He wins a second Hobie Baker. Maybe they win the Frozen Four. I don't know. I wouldn't have been mad if he'd gone back to college. I think that young players can basically always use a little more development. But I think he's NHL ready. I think he's physically ready. Whether he's emotionally ready, we'll find out. But I know that Jarmo Kekalainen is big on Adam Fantilli, and again, thinks he's NHL ready. I don't think we should be, and again, like I said in the last segment, we should temper expectations and not expect him to come in and be, Austin Matthews scoring 4 goals in his first game level. I don't think we should come in and expect him to fill that 1C spot immediately. But I'm excited. I'm super excited for Adam Fantilli to be a Blue Jacket. And like I said, I wouldn't have been mad if he'd gone back to Michigan, but I am thrilled that we're going to get to see him in a Blue Jackets jersey this season.
I would have been livid if he went back to Michigan. Okay? I would have been livid. I saw this tweet from the CBJ Center. These guys do a phenomenal job just covering all things Blue Jackets. They're on Twitter at CBJ Center, and they tweeted out, forget about the rest of the roster for this poll, but does Fantilli, Sillinger, 1C, 2C have the potential to lead the Blue Jackets to a Stanley Cup? And I clicked yes, because I was just like, I was that excited in the moment. And then when I saw that 63% of Blue Jackets fans also selected yes, I was like, whoa, okay. People are pretty optimistic about both of these dudes, one of these dudes severely needs developed, like Sillinger. He had a good year last year with the Monsters, but he still needs to develop. And Fantilli, we haven't even seen play on NHL ice once yet. But to your point back there, yeah, I don't think it would do him any to go back to Michigan and dominate NCAA hockey again. It probably would help his confidence to be like, yeah, this wasn't a fluke, but I feel like getting drafted number 3 overall, you kind of confirm for yourself, yeah, this isn't a fluke.
Dude won 2 gold medals last year.
Yeah.
I don't think confidence is going to be a big problem.
True.
In the same way, I get the same sort of vibes from him as I get from Kent Johnson of there is just nothing you can do to that dude to make him less confident in his own abilities. And I think, which is a thing that, we kind of discussed with Cole Sillinger when we did his season review of, it's tough. Sometimes when you're a young player and things aren't going your way, it's tough to kind of not grip the stick too tight, which is a stupid cliche, but I get it, Sillinger's going to be a really interesting training camp watch for me. I think if we are lucky, I think Mike Babcock could be the making of Cole Sillinger, but it really feels like it's going to be boom or bust at this point. I don't necessarily want to see him with the Monsters next season. I would love to see him on Columbus, whether that's as a center, whether that's as a winger, I'm not sure, but I think he needs to be thrown in at the deep end again, and I think he'll swim. I think the poll, I think, is specifically hype for Adam Fantilli over Sillinger, because I saw the same poll, and I did what I rarely do, which is I just took a little dive into the replies of a tweet about the Blue Jackets. There were a lot of people saying yes to Fantilli, but no, we need to get rid of Sillinger as soon as possible, which feels like, again, something that we say all the time on this podcast. He's 20 years old. He's a child.
That is child age.
He's not a bust.
Is he actually 20? He cannot buy a drink in Columbus. That's hilarious. That is really crazy. No, he's so young. You're absolutely right, Jay. He's too young to just give up on him. He had a great first year. But I think even in that first year, the Blue Jacket fan can look back at that and be like, man, was this guy in the right place at the right time for a lot of these goals, or what? Because he was. The difference between Fantilli and Sillinger is Fantilli, all 9 other guys on the ice are just watching Fantilli play. Now, that was the case when he was in the NCAA, but the truth is Fantilli has that extra gear on the ice that Cole Sillinger doesn't really have, that I think is gonna translate a lot quicker to the NHL and be a lot more exciting. So you're right. That poll was 100% about Fantilli as a 1 seed. They might as well just ask, can Fantilli lead the Blue Jackets to a Stanley Cup? Because that's where my level of excitement was. I'm also not forgetting about Boone Jenner. Like, I kind of hate how we just write Boone Jenner off as like he can't play in the top 2. I don't see that at all. Boone Jenner he was phenomenal last year.
Boone Jenner did a really good job he might be the only player on the Blue Jackets, I think, that like we've talked about it a lot this season, of a lot of guys playing above their station and struggling. Boone Jenner, I think, is a guy that got that C on his jersey and then immediately took his game to the next level.
Yeah.
That being said, I am fine with Boone Jenner playing between Laine and Gaudreau. Like, that line was fine. I just wonder, how good is he going to be playing against weaker competition, playing less minutes? He's not old by any stretch of the imagination. He, I think, literally just turned 30.
30, yeah.
He's a guy that I think watch out for to have a sneaky good season. But also, if you have to keep him between Laine and Gaudreau, so you can put, like, I was thinking about this the other day, like, who would I want Fantilli to play between this season? And like the concept of like, here, let me give you this: a second line of Kent Johnson, Adam Fantilli, Kirill Marchenko.
That sounds like offense. It sounds like a lot of goals.
Like, that feels like a real good time to me, and that will give Fantilli the sheltered minutes to develop. We can leave Boone Jenner on that top line for now, unless they go out and get someone to replace him. But like, even if Boone Jenner plays in the middle 6 this season, I think he's going to be fine. But I think it really depends. Boone Jenner's job, I think, really depends on how fast Adam Fantilli adapts to the NHL, which I think is going to be really interesting to watch.
That's fair. Jay, it's really good to have you back, man. Really appreciate you coming back from vacation. I don't know what else you would do.
I considered just leaving forever, but I was like, no, Hayden would miss me too much. Maybe the fans wouldn't miss me as much, but I feel like Hayden would miss me.
I would definitely miss you. I definitely would miss you. That's all we have for today. Tomorrow we'll be doing some more coverage on all the Jackets draft picks in this year's entry-level draft, just more of a deep dive. So that should be really exciting. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for making this your first listen every day. Locked On Blue Jackets is free and available on all podcast platforms, YouTube, and the SiriusXM app. I'm Hayden Househorn. You can find me on Twitter at HaydenH971. You can find Jay on Twitter @_Jacob Foster. That's Jacob with a K. Throw an R after the O and Foster there, and that should get you to Jacob's page.
Well, Twitter still exists anyway.
While Twitter still exists. Yeah, it's an absolute crap show. You can find Locked on Blue Jackets on Twitter @LO_Blue Jackets, or you can email us at lockedonbluejackets@gmail.com. Thank you once again for listening. And until tomorrow, make sure you stay locked on.